Motivation in motion. Own your moment and get better today. Okay, let's get started. Hey, Coach, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you coming to have a conversation on the couch.
You honor me.
Oh, no, the blessing's ours. So if you could tell us a little bit about where you're from and kind of how you got into the coaching, and I'd like to hear just a backstory, a little bit about Chuck Bowman.
Well, that's pretty easy. A long time ago, almost 88 years ago now, I was born and raised in Ponca City, Oklahoma. Fortunately, into a great Christian family. My mother taught a Bible class at First Baptist Church in Ponca City for 60 years. And I was the last of their 6. My mom and dad were 45 when I was born. So it wasn't really a planned deal. I like to tell this story that I think my dad probably sometime in February looked at my mother one night and said, "Let's go for 6." And that was the first football terminology listed in our family. And my first 4 siblings were not athletes. But my brother Dick, who came along at age, when they were 40, he was 5 years older.
Okay.
He became a good football player.
Okay.
And he was the starting left tackle on the OU Sooners football team when Billy Vessels won the Heisman Trophy.
Okay.
Well, with that incentive all the way through my life, I knew one thing: I wanted to be just like my brother.
Wow.
You know, it was one of those deals where you want to follow in his steps. And almost did it, but not quite.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about that.
Well, had that accident not happened my senior year, I could have probably had a good chance.
I'm not so sure. Probably. I've heard you could play ball.
Well,
I heard you were All-American.
No.
Right?
This was all someone else's opinion.
Okay.
That's the way always All-American things. But anyway, I did have a good career. I was very good as a football player, and I could have been a state champion wrestler. My senior year, I'd placed 3rd my junior year, and because of the accident, I didn't get to wrestle the rest of that year. But I was a captain of our baseball team. I was a very good pitcher, according to my coach, and I was also the sprinter on our track team. I didn't really realize that till my junior year.
As an offensive lineman, though, right?
Yeah,
that was your football.
I was 6'1", 185 pounds. But at any rate, one day I challenged the 2 guys that were our top 2 sprinters, and I beat them both in a 100-yard dash. And my track coach was rather surprised. But those things helped me, along the way. But as I grew up in Ponca City, it was during those early 50s where everything was just almost too good to be true.
Okay.
We didn't have all the challenges that kids have today. Drinking a Coke was really out of bounds. I mean, the coaches didn't want you drinking anything with carbonated water for some reason. And if they caught you or you heard about it, you'd be penalized for it.
Wow.
I mean, that's how serious it was. My 2 wrestling coaches in junior high were both World War II guys and very disciplinary person. They were tough guys. And, when you're 14, 15 years, you got to adjust to that or forget it.
You were a little intimidated by him?
Yeah, a little bit. But when I got to high school, my high school coach had never played football. He was a track athlete. In fact, he came here to Central Teachers College at that time.
Okay.
And he was on the track team. And then he went into World War II and was a physical trainer. Didn't really have any sport in particular, but he loved athletics. So they hired him in the junior high in Ponca City, and he eventually became the head football coach at Ponca City High School.
Okay.
And during those days when Continental Oil Company was going full strong, we had some really good athletes. I mean, 2 of my wrestling athletes, teammates, went on and won gold medals in the '60 Olympics.
Okay.
They were the only 2, they are today, the only 2 high school or gold medal winners that came off the same high school team in Ponca City.
Wow.
Doug Blueball and Shelby Wilson was her name.
Okay.
And they were both farm kids, came off farms. and tougher than nails, of course. But Doug was a senior my junior year, and Shelby was a sophomore. Doug went on and won national championships at OSU.
Mm-hmm.
Shelby never won a national championship, but was always there. And Shelby was the godly guy. He was the Christian guy of that bunch,
Okay.
really strong Christian. He is today, this very day. Went on to coach at Michigan State and several really Big Ten teams. And Doug passed away not too long ago on a motorcycle accident.
Mm.
But both of them were really good guys, and it was kind of a privilege to be able to say I was on their team.
On your team. That's
But
great.
at any rate, fast forward, I recovered from the accident. It took 10 weeks.
Can you
out
share a
of my
little bit
high
about that?
school-
Would you
pardon me?
mind? Would you just tell our...
Well, it was an automobile accident involving a drunk driver.
Okay.
And it was on a Sunday night, and the girl I was dating, her father was a pastor of a small country church outside of Ponca City.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone out to pick her up so we could come into town to go to First Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And on our way into town, this car hit us. They were turning into a bar alongside the road, thinking my headlights were the bar. But at any rate, didn't realize what had hit me.
Okay.
Never knew what hit me. And I woke up 9 days later in the hospital, looking down at my legs, and they were as wide as the bone was in my leg. I'd lost 40 pounds in 9 days. And I just didn't know what's happened. Just couldn't believe it. And of course, I was told by the highway patrolman what happened and everything that came. And I missed 10 weeks of school. I missed the whole third quarter of school.
Wow.
Probably shouldn't have graduated, really. But I picked it up the fourth quarter, got better, started working out. I'd fractured my right arm real bad in the accident, had to carry it on a cast for 12 weeks
Okay.
during that time and so I was weighing about 170 pounds when summer came, and I was bound to determine I was going to play in the All-State game.
Okay.
And I had to get Dr. O'Donohue. He was a great orthopedic guy in Oklahoma City, fixed my arm. I had to get his permission because the arm was not quite all together yet, but he did. He gave me permission. And I got to start in that game.
Okay.
They moved me from a tackle, I was playing tackle, to an end, which was fine with me, not weighing 170 pounds.
Yeah.
And I was also selected as one of the captains.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, those things were really amazing to me. But at any rate, we don't win the game, but we play tough enough.
Okay.
And then my journey to OU begins.
Yeah.
And Coach Wilkinson told me, he came up to see me when I was in the hospital. He said, "Chuck, don't worry about football. Your scholarship is good." He promised me a scholarship, even though he knew I might not be able to play. That's the kind of man he was.
So he had offered you before the wreck.
Yep.
And you had accepted.
Yep.
He comes and visits you.
Yep.
And
Tells me it's good.
And says, this is not a concern. You're going to be a Sooner regardless.
That's what it was. And so, that was kind of a blessing.
Oh.
Because that's what I wanted to do. I get to Oklahoma, and I fall into the best bunch of guys.
Okay.
I remember the dinner we had before the first season, the first practice started. Port Robertson was our coach. He was a great wrestling coach,
Okay.
one of Bud's assistants. And he had a dinner for us, and we were all to wear coats and ties at this dinner.
Okay.
And a good-looking group of guys, I think there were about 65 of us there. Not all scholarship guys, but, some preferred walk-ons, what they'd call them today.
Right.
And it was just a great group of guys to be with. Freshmen couldn't play that year, so we were just more or less cannon fodder for the varsity. Found out who's tough and who's, should go home. And a lot of them did go home. But we hung in there, and my freshman year, we really had a good football team.
Okay.
And that was the 1954 season. The 1955 season, my sophomore year, we won the national championship undefeated.
Okay.
And played in the Orange Bowl and won it. Beat Maryland in the Orange Bowl. Next year did the same thing. Won it all.
Okay.
Was the 56
Now,
team.
that's the streak, right?
Yes, it started the streak.
Just started the streak.
Yeah, well,
okay. 47,
continued.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the 56 team is 1956 Sooners, was the one that Bud Wilkinson said was probably his best team.
His best team.
Had Clendon Thomas and had Billy Tommy McDonald, and just a great group of guys.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys went on and had great pro careers. And I sat there as a center linebacker. I had to play both of those guys. And I had a guy named Jerry Tubbs playing in front of me, and he was the Outland Trophy winner, a great All-American.
Right.
And a guy named Bobby Harrison, who was behind me, he became an All-American. Played 14 years with friends. So I was kind of in a fun spot to be, try to play much. But it was a great learning experience for me. I learned what a great man Bud Wilkinson really was.
But you'd already kind of known that.
I knew it, but I really didn't realize it until I sat listening to him pregame talks, Sunday afternoon, after ball game talk. Realized who he really was. He was a brilliant man. He had an
I've
English.
heard that.
He was an English major.
Okay.
And he would quote Shakespeare. He'd quote all the great writers, and by heart. I mean, he could just. Not too many football coaches did that.
Right.
Those days. And the thing I never heard him say though was a curse word.
Interesting.
He never used it. His coaches never used it.
Interesting.
I mean, maybe a damn or hell somewhere, but
Right.
not out of Bud Wilkinson.
It's funny you say that. I see it all at staffs all the time right now. It drives me crazy. I think you can coach with intensity with zero of those. We can come up with better words.
When I was working with coaches in FCA, I'd always tell them, I said, talk to your kids like you would their parents in their home.
Yeah.
And that'll tell you them who you are. You don't have to talk that way.
Right.
And that's awful hard to get coaches to understand today, because most of those coaches of today were players that use that language anyway. You know, it was just they probably don't even know they're talking that way. But it really speaks to a man's character and who he is and how he's, what he thinks. I think his language does.
I agree. I completely agree. I just think, too, when we challenge young men and we're trying to hold them accountable, and then we throw out a word like that, I think we lose credibility.
You do.
I'm asking you to do all these little details and then I'm going to use language, and I think it discounts all that accountability that coaches are trying to build.
You know, what that tells you is that when we were born, God gave us a sense of right and wrong. And speaking in terms of the world is not wrong. Is not right. So if it's not right, it's wrong.
Well, it's funny, you made an observation about Coach Wilkinson, right? In his character by the words that he used, right?
Exactly.
So if you come visit a campus that I'm coaching on, I hope the staff reflects that few minutes, right? Where it's like,
I promise you they do.
Where if we're down there and we're dog cussing kids or just cussing in general, I think you're like, man, what are those guys doing?
I never heard my high school coach curse. I mean, that was just I guess it would be called culture.
Okay.
We just didn't do it then, And as our culture's gone downhill, and it has gone downhill, the language is different.
Yeah.
And what really bothers me is when I hear a woman use those kind of words, When a woman swears and uses the same language as a trash can, I lose my respect quite fast.
Yeah, I think when coaches have such an ability, and I've heard so many people say this, you're good words and bad words, right? And we don't realize what we're doing a lot of times and the influence that just a few words might have in a young man or young woman. And so I appreciate that. So you go on, you got 47, you're part of the streak. You see all these qualities in Coach Wilkinson, and then you decide you're going to go coach, right?
I decided that a long time before.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to do. In 1956, Coach Wilkinson, it was after spring practice, called our squad together and said, we're going to have a meeting tonight in the Jeff House, in the dorm. And 3 men are going to come and speak to you about a new organization they call the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And those 3 men were Doak Walker. He had been the 3-time All-American at SMU, premier running back with the Detroit Lions at the time. Otto Graham was the quarterback of the National Football League. And a guy named Pepper Martin, who was with the St. Louis Gas House baseball game, played with Dizzy Dean and that bunch of guys.
Okay.
And he was from Warner, Oklahoma.
Huh. And
so I was tuned in. I wanted to hear what these guys had to say. And they come into to the meeting room where we were all of us were there. And I really wanted to hear what they had to say because Fellowship of Christian Athletes sounds like something I would like be interested in. Well, each one of them spoke about 15 minutes, the first 10 about their football and their baseball time. But the rest of their talk was about having a Christian mother. And I could relate to that. And as they went on to speak, I said, I could have that testimony. That's my testimony. They're sharing my testimony. I could do that. And, but, they were all pros. They were great athletes. They had a name. That's why we're there. Their name brought them there. And I thought, I'll never have a name as an athlete here because I'm not an All-American. I'm not even a starter here. But maybe as a coach, I could have that.
Wow. And
so that's when I decided that's where I'm going to be.
Okay.
And I talked to Coach Wilkinson about it. He said, "You'll do fine. You've been trained. You know the game. You know what's going on. You've got a personality that will sell what you want to sell." And so I felt good that I could do that.
Yeah.
Well, the Notre Dame comes in 1957. We beat them in South Bend the year before, 40-0. That was the 56 year. 57, here we come. And the coaches were really, really on edge about this because they just didn't want Notre Dame to end this winning streak. So I've talked to Clendon Thomas several times. We've stayed good friends. And he's told me, he said, "Chuck, we lost that game because we were overworked all week long." He said, "I had no legs at halftime." Yeah. And I remember our team was just kind of sluggish, we just couldn't get it done. We didn't score. I mean, that was impossible because we'd been averaging 40, 45 points a game. And the other sad thing about that is Notre Dame had only won 3 games that whole year.
Wow.
They weren't really a good team. The year before when we beat them in South Bend, their quarterback was Paul Hornung.
Right.
As good a football player as ever played. And we beat them 40-0 up there. But at any rate, they came, they won the game. We leave the field. I mean, there's 50-some thousand people in Owen Field, and that's about all that took hold. I mean, there wasn't a seat empty.
Right.
And as I was leaving the field after the game, I looked up into the stands, and the only people standing were wearing white collars. There were Catholic priests that had come to the game, and they were cheering, and they were everywhere. It was a rather remarkable thing. But we get in the locker room, we sit down, and Coach Wilkinson didn't come in for the longest time. We just wondered because he usually is right in there. But we're all sitting in there, headgear's on still, and shoulder gear ready to go. We should play a fifth quarter here. And pretty soon he comes in, he says, "I've been over in the locker room just congratulating Terry Brennan, the football coach. He's 28 years old, 28 years old head coach." And he said, "I just wanted to tell them that they were a great team today and they beat a team. They were the best team on the field." I mean, he complimented them. Now, most head coaches that just lost this would be beating his head against the wall, though. Not him. Not him. He showed his class. And then the thing that he said to us was rather remarkable, and probably no one ever really heard it except the team. But the first thing he said, "I hate this loss for the state of Oklahoma. I also hate this loss for the University of Oklahoma." But he said, "The reason I really hate this loss is for the seniors in this team. The seniors on this team."
He knew they would carry that.
Had this not happened, you could have been the first team to win 3 national championships in a row. and we did win the rest of our games that year. And had Notre Dame been, my class would have been the first class and the only class in history of NCAA football to win 3 national championships in a row. And you know, the thing I could see in him was his character at that time.
Wow.
A lot of coaches would have not felt that way.
Oh, yeah. Especially a game you're supposed to win, right? We see that.
He had chewed our rears out. You know, it would have been all laid out, but not him. That wasn't him. But, you know, the season went on. I think we had 4 more ball games. We won them all. And then played in the Orange Bowl.
Okay.
The crazy thing about that time of football is a team that played in an Orange Bowl or any bowl game, and there were only 4. One year they couldn't play it the following year. They couldn't play back to back.
I kind of remember stories
in a bowl
about
game.
that. Yeah.
Here, the '56 team, Oklahoma was the number 1 team in the nation, weren't allowed to play in a bowl game.
Wow.
Now that's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah.
We that week that the bowl games were building, Syracuse came to Norman to work out for a week on our football field because they were going to play in Dallas in the Cotton Bowl.
In the Cotton Bowl.
And they had a football player by the name of Jim Brown as their running back.
Yeah.
And we'd heard about Jim Brown. And Clinton and I were roommates at the time. I said, let's go watch this guy. So we went over and watched him, and we both laughed. We said, this guy couldn't make our team. He's a loafer. He just walks everywhere he goes. The only time they were running play polish, you know.
Right.
And they'd hand the ball to him, and he'd just jog around there. And I told Clinton, I said, Coach Wilkinson run him off first day.
Oh.
And then he was
one of the greatest running backs of all time.
Probably the best.
Yeah, you know. The legend himself.
Oh, my. I watched him play. In fact, Clinton went on and played against him. Clinton played with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they were playing Cleveland. And in one game, Clinton tackled him by himself 8 times by himself. And his team gave him the game ball for that.
Wow.
Because that's how much they respected Jim Brown.
Jim Brown. Man, it's a small world.
Clinton said that he probably weighed 240, probably run a 4.40.
Now, how long did you coach? So you wrap up your career, and then you go straight into high school coaching.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Tulsa McLain, Tulsa Central.
Well, I was finishing up my master's degree at OU.
Okay.
My brother was the head football coach at Shawnee High School, and I needed to do my practice coaching. So I go over there to finish. I help him that season. The football season passes, and we go into the second semester. He gets a call from our hometown, Ponca City, and Coach Sullins was resigned, and they offered the job to Dick, and he took it. And he asked me if I wanted to go with him, and I said, well, probably do, but let's just wait till this thing plays out. 2 weeks later, I get a call from Tulsa Central High School.
Okay.
And Tulsa had opened up 2 new high schools, Tulsa Hale and Tulsa McLain, and they took all the main coaches, except for the head coach, out of Central to fill those jobs. So the job at Tulsa Central was open, and I go over and interview with the head football coach, just loved the guy.
Okay.
He'd have been a World War II hero, and I didn't know it at the time, but he was 10 years older than me. He was 35, I'm 25.
Okay.
But I just knew I could handle it.
All right.
They hired Eddie Sutton as a basketball coach.
Okay.
They hired a friend of mine, a state national champion wrestler from Ponca City, Ned Blass. They hired him as a wrestling coach. They hired me as a track coach, the football assistant coach, and the wrestling assistant coach.
Okay.
I was a duck out of water being head coach in track. Okay. I really wasn't qualified that. But the athletic director, who had been the track coach, told me he'd help me.
We always
and
need a
so
little
I
help.
felt good about that.
Yeah.
I was single. I was the only single guy on the staff. And what we were really celebrating, though, was that we were going to make $5,500 a year.
Wow.
We all had master's degrees. They were going to pay us $5,000 to teach. I was teaching English. Eddie Sutton was coaching history, and Ned was coaching in the business. And we got $500 for coaching 3 sports.
Wow. And you were happy about it.
Oh, thrilled to death.
Right?
Of course, gas was 26 cents a gallon.
I was going to say, what would we do now? I don't,
it was just all relatively, but
I understand.
it was probably one of the better paying jobs. 5,000 students in that high school.
Okay. Wow.
Right downtown, still the most beautiful building in Tulsa. But I had learned that there was a single teacher there by the name of Betty Dobbs.
Okay.
And I'd been urged to meet her. And so one day, before practice started, I went up to her classroom where they didn't have any students, but she was in a classroom getting ready for the school year. And that doesn't do too bad. And so I just walked right in there and introduced myself. She knew I was there. I mean, she knew I was on the staff and everything.
She had seen you first.
Yeah, she knew who I was. She was an Oklahoma State grad, or Oklahoma A&M College.
Okay.
And very, very bright gal. And so we started dating. And it kind of became the deal with the students, especially she was the head of the pep squad, there were about 150 girls in that. And so it was kind of a fun thing,
I can imagine.
But the football season went along. Rosie Nolan was my head coach. He gave me much more responsibility than I deserved. And then as soon as that season was over, went right into wrestling with Ned and then the track season. Central High School had some really good athletes at the time. And one of the football athletes I had was a guy named Gary Howard. And he was really a good player. I wanted him to go to OU because I knew he could play there, but OU wasn't really interested in him till real late. But Arkansas is interested in him right now.
Yeah.
He goes to Arkansas, plays with Barry Switzer and Larry Lace.
So Gary Howard was my
bunch of those
college
guys.
coach.
Really?
Yeah. Gary was on this campus,
Sure.
right?
Well, yes, that's right.
Yeah, right. So,
well, see, he came to coach with me too at NEO.
Okay.
He was my defensive coordinator.
I remember he had a stint there.
I knew he was coaching at Del City High School, and when I got the NEO job, I called him. I said, I need you to come help me. They're going to allow me to bring one coach.
Now, you guys won 2 national championships.
That year we won that national championship.
Yeah.
He was a great coach there.
He was a great
coach.
And
I hated losing, but Phil Ball was the coach here, head coach, and he got Gary. And, of course, Gary had a great career here. And we've stayed good friends. We're good friends to this day.
Yeah, Gary was so gracious to me for 2 years here on this campus. It was a great experience. I always tell people it was a dream to play at OU, but it was a privilege to be here.
Well, he had some very good football teams. He knew defense really well. But back to the Central time, I spent 5 years there.
Okay.
And the thing I remember about those 5 years most of all is that Rosie and I became really good friends, the head coach.
Okay.
And we lockered together every day. We showered. We became really good friends. And one day we were getting ready to get dressed, and I looked at his foot, and he was missing 2 toes on his foot. And I said, Coach, what happened? How'd you lose your toes? And he didn't go there. He just kind of left it off.
Okay.
40 years later, I learned that he was, when he was a young man, he joined the Army, got into the 101st Airborne, made the landing behind enemy lines on D-Day in Normandy. And it was a miracle. He told me, he says, I lost those toes because my feet froze, frostbite. And he said, it hadn't been for General Patton, none of my group would have ever come out of there. 50 guys, because of General Patton, walked out of the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
And saved him. But Rosie lived a good life. He moved out to California, and I visited him several times.
Now, we know each other, so I got to hear more about this story about Betty. So when is this going on? All this during this time?
Yeah, we're dating that first year.
Okay.
And I'm finding out more about her. She's finding out more about me. We decided at Christmas time that this is the deal. Maybe the Lord's in this. No question about it. And I gave her a ring at Christmas time. I said this. I said, Betty, I know we can make it in this marriage, but I tell you, I really believe that we need to be under one faith, in one church. And I know you're Methodist, and I know you're saved because we talked about that. But you know, if you will join the Baptist church, we can raise our family there. And she said, I have no problem with that. And so as we went ahead, she said, the one thing I wanted her to do was to visit with my pastor, a guy named Warren Hultgren at First Baptist Church of Tulsa.
Okay.
And I called Dr. Hultgren, and he said, get her over here. And I told him before that, I said, Dr. Hultgren, she's a believer, but she's never been baptized. You know, she's been sprinkled in the Methodist church, but she's never been baptized. And I'll take care of that. And found out that Betty had had a bad experience in a swimming pool when she was at Oklahoma A&M and scared of water, really scared to put her head in the water. And so I didn't know how that was going to go.
Right.
But it went fine.
It went fine?
Dr. Holgren convinced her it would be fine.
Wow.
And she went through baptism, and we got married there in that church and started a life there.
Wow.
That was 1960.
And now you've been married for?
63 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Marriage hasn't been easy.
Right.
You know, when you're a coach and when you're not home a lot, and then when we took the FCA job,
Right.
there was nothing promised there.
Yeah.
In fact, when we took the FCA job in 1973 right here in Edmond, there was not one dime set aside for the ministry.
Right.
The guys who hired me said, you can raise it.
You know what I love about that statement is you said we took the FCA.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did.
Right.
She was my right hand because she was a business education gal, and she knew bookkeeping. She knew how to, she could type great. I mean, she could do all my letters, everything. She was the perfect person for FCA.
Wow.
And she loved it. She became the kind of the godmother of all those
Yeah.
staff guys.
And then, I mean, the trajectory of the number of coaches that you influenced through FCA.
Oh, it's been amazing.
I mean, legacy bond, just legacy after legacy. Is there any, story that stands out at FCA for you that was just either a challenging moment or a glorious moment or both that you and Betty kind of worked through together? Or would you?
Well, there were more victories than losses in this ministry.
God kind of handles that, right?
But there were a couple of things that I remember that were, disastrous at first, but became really victories.
Okay.
My first year at McLain, I took 32 kids to FCA camp in Estes Park.
Okay.
One of the first things I wanted to do is to introduce FCA to my football team. And so I didn't know any of these kids, but I got the word out, and we had a meeting, and 32 kids agreed to go. I had some Tulsa businessmen pay for the bus, paid for the trip. They didn't cost them a dime, and most of those kids had never been north of Turley.
Wow.
It was McLain was on the north side of town, and most of those kids didn't even go to a Tulsa junior high. They went to junior high over in Turley. But at any rate, Betty and I have two kids at this time.
Okay.
And they're both really crib babies yet. So we put cribs on the back of the bus, and so they can, and we get on the bus, and it's 13 hours up there.
Oh, yeah.
So we go all night long, and the guys were not rowdy, but they were just kind of loose. And we get to Estes Park, and one of my best friends ever was a guy named James Jeffrey, and he was the president of FCA at the time.
Okay.
He was a Baylor football player before he went into FCA full time, and so he was there to meet us, and I just could see a great week ahead of us. Well, the first thing we do is check everybody in. We have dinner, and then we go to the first evening program.
Right.
I didn't know it, but four of my guys decide they're not going to that meeting. They're going to hitchhike in town to Estes Park.
Okay.
And they got in trouble. I get a call at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's from the police, the Estes Park police. I've got 4 of your people down here. They've been caught stealing T-shirts out of a store, and I want you to come down here and tell us what to do with them. I think I'm having a nightmare.
Right. Yeah, you're responsible for
Yeah.
all these young men.
I am.
Yeah.
And it's just not a good way to start. But at any rate, I wake up one of my other coaching buddies there, and he goes down with me. We borrow a car and we go downtown, Estes Park, and his name is Bill Allen. He was head basketball coach at Tulsa Webster for years.
Okay.
Great coach. And as we were going into Estes, about 5-6 miles, Bill could tell I was really upset.
Okay.
And he said, Chuck, what do you think you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And I was just really upset. He pulls the car over. He says, I think we ought to pray about what we're going to do. And so he prayed, give us wisdom, give us patience, give us understanding why this is happening. And so we go on down there, and these 4 kids are all sophomores, all first-year guys. Not bad kids, just made a bad decision.
Okay.
But I'm still a little bit hot, and I don't know whether to put them on a bus and send them home
Okay.
or look for a rope.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, that's where I was. But
Hence the prayer. He could see you
Yeah.
boiling. Your buddy's trying to run that
telling you
little
what.
patience, and let's get the Lord in
yeah,
this.
but I could tell these guys are scared to death. I
Okay.
mean, they're shaken.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told them, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you stay at this camp. But the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to apologize to your teammates, all the guys that came up here. We'll get them in the morning, and you're going to have to apologize. That happened. All 4 of those guys got saved at that camp.
Wow.
All 4 of them.
Grace.
We go home. Now, that's not the end of the story. We don't have a very good first season. We lose our first 7 ball games.
Okay.
The second year, we're getting a little better. We could tell that these sophomores I've been playing are getting a little better. In fact, we beat Booker T. Washington at Hornet Stadium
Okay.
that year. It had never been done. I'm coach of the week. But at any rate, go ahead and finish that season. Our senior year, when these guys are all basically now seniors, we play Enid for the state championship.
Wow.
And those 4 guys were all starters on that team.
Wow.
One of them got a full scholarship to OU, started all 3 years there, and Johnny Watson ended up playing 9 years with San Francisco 49ers.
Wow.
And I looked at him and thinking, I could have sent him home.
Good.
And he'd never played it down. Wow. I mean, that's how God works in these things.
100%.
And, that was one of the most, amazing stories that I had as a coach.
I could see the panic. If you're a young coach, you've got all these men you're in charge of. I've been on those bus rides. You're scared to death someone's going to do something stupid.
That's right.
And then you guys give them grace, and then the Lord does the rest of the work.
It was just meant to be. I mean, there's no question as I've looked back, it was meant to be. And then the person asked me, Chuck, one time, what's the greatest compliment you've ever had?
Okay.
And it had nothing to do with football.
Right.
I had a football player at NEO, came from a real tough background.
Okay.
And after his second season, which he had a good second season, he came to me and he says, Coach Bowman, I want to let you know something. I've been in church a lot. I've read my Bible. I've been in a lot of places and heard great testimonies. He said, hearing that and reading that is not what I needed. I needed to see someone flesh that out.
Wow.
And I saw it in you.
Wow.
I don't know if I've ever had a better compliment than that.
Wow.
He said, I saw it in you. He said, I needed to see it in somewhere, So.
We get, it's so crazy that coaches stand in the gap for so many men and women. And that's really kind of why we started doing this, right? Is I'm watching men and women quit because of a tragedy or something, and we're trying to encourage them to stay after it.
Yeah.
because someone needs to see it fleshed out.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that we get to share this couch time for me, today is just so personal.
Yeah.
I knew it. I told myself I wasn't gonna cry.
That's good.
But when you get the opportunity to influence someone and change their trajectory, it has such an incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
And I just thank you so much. I mean, what you and
Yeah.
Betty have done, it has left.
I learned a long time ago that I came to the realization that, I've heard people say, hey, God knew you before you were born. He knows the number of hairs on your head, just all kinds of great illustrations of how great God is. But one day, I've finally looked back on all the things that's happened to me. And there's no way that I could have probably experienced what I experienced had I been an All-American football player.
Or played for the Yankees.
It just,
Right?
Pardon?
I mean, I hear a rumor going around that the same guy recruiting Mickey Mantle's recruiting you
Well,
before the car wreck.
That happened too.
And so,
But all those things that could have happened would have never measured up to what did happen.
wow.
And so that's why I'm so blessed today to. It's still happening.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, I was invited to speak at a coaches' spring banquet, coaches and wives spring banquet in Valdosta, Georgia.
Okay.
The reason why I was invited there is because I had two of my players at NEO went back to Valdosta where they
Okay.
grew up, and they met the FCA guy there. He's the Southeast Regional
Okay.
Director. And they told this guy about my FCA work in Oklahoma. And this guy calls me and says, hey, could you come out here and speak? And I said, there's no way. I can't get through, Atlanta and all that stuff. Well, we kind of put it to sleep. And the next week, I shared that story with one of our guys and the coaches that I knew was a pilot. He says, Chuck, I think I can find you a pilot in an airplane.
Okay.
Oh, no, you can't. That's too far down there, 800 miles. He says, I'll call you back. Next day he called me, I got you a plane and I got you a pilot. In fact, the pilot has been in Top Gun school.
Wow.
He's 74 years old now, but he's got his own airplane. He lives in Dallas.
Okay.
And he flew up here to Oklahoma City, picked me up on a Tuesday morning out at Wiley Post, 350-mile-an-hour airplane.
Okay.
We landed in Valdosta in 3 hours. We did the banquet that night. 300 and some odd coaches and their wives.
Wow.
And then the next morning we got on that airplane. 3 hours later we were back here.
That's perfect.
Now tell me if that isn't a miracle.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
that's great.
Those are still happening, see?
Yeah.
And that's what's really amazing to me.
If I could ask you one thing, if you were to leave one thought or idea to the men and women that are still coaching, what would you say?
Well, first of all, they've got to understand if it's not this way, they ought to be doing something else. Coaching is a calling. There's no question about it. If you don't feel the Lord has called you to coach or something has called you to coach, you probably are in the wrong business.
Okay.
Because there's too many potholes and there's too many disappointments and there's just too many tragedies, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Look at the number of coaches that have lost their families, the wives have left them. It's a pretty dangerous occupation that way. But they're also the greatest joys in life.
Wow.
You see a young 16-year-old boy when he's 18 years old, he's different.
Yeah. Yeah, going back to those four guys, right?
Exactly.
And you go back to what they were at sophomore to their senior and then what their trajectory was after that.
That's probably the advantage of a high school coach over a college coach.
100%.
He gets to see that young, skinny kid as a 16-year-old blossom into a man. I've seen that. And you have too.
Yeah.
But that's probably the thing I would say
It's
to
a
most
calling.
coaches. Make sure you're called to do this. Don't take it for granted that your dad, just because he was a coach, don't take that's your job too.
100%. Well,
And
Chuck, I could sit here on the couch with you all day.
Oh, I know.
And if the good Lord blesses it, will you come back?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. It's been my honor. Thank you so
Well,
much,
thank you,
man. I
Todd.
appreciate
You've
you.
been great.
Absolutely.
All right.